The year is 2025 in the Boé forest of Guinea-Bissau. A camera trap films a grown male chimpanzee walking up to a tree, picking up a stone, and striking the trunk with full force, then repeating the blow again and again. At the foot of that tree, a whole mound of such stones has already piled up. The animal is not cracking anything open, not hunting, not feeding. And why it does this? No one yet knows for certain. Chimpanzees have been watched for more than half a century, and only now have scientists heard in these blows something like a stone drum, most likely the male's way of calling the others across the whole forest. But why? Out of all the trees, it comes back again and again to this one scientists cannot explain. To see how close this male's behavior is to our own, we need to go back 60 years to the moment when scientists first realized that apes are slowly catching up to humankind. It is the fall of 1960 at the Gombe Reserve on the shore of Lake Tanganyika. For the first time in history, wild chimpanzees are being watched by a 26-year-old Englishwoman, Jane Goodall, who has neither a scientific degree nor a weapon. In those years, scientists were certain that tool-making was the very thing that set humans apart from all other animals, and they even called the idea exactly that: man the toolmaker. And there, by a termite mound, Goodall notices an old male with a gray beard, whom she named David Graybeard. He takes a blade of grass, carefully slides it into a passage in the mound, and waits for the soldier termites to clamp onto it with their jaws, then pulls the stalk out and eats the insects clinging to it. But what happens next changes science forever. David breaks off a twig, strips the leaves from it, and turns it into a thin, flexible probe. He does not merely use a ready-made tool, he makes one himself, deliberately giving the stick the shape the job calls for. Until that moment, tool-making had never been seen in a single animal on Earth. When Goodall told her mentor, the paleoanthropologist Louis Leakey, what she had seen, he answered with a line that became legendary. Now we must either redefine the tool, redefine man, or accept chimpanzees as humans. And every discovery that followed only confirmed it. The gap between what apes can do and what humans can do keeps shrinking. It soon became clear that David was no exception. In different corners of Africa, different chimpanzee communities use tools in their own ways, and scientists have counted 39 such lasting habits passed down from one generation to the next, from ways of gathering termites to gestures of greeting. This is no longer a single trick, but something very much like human culture. And yet fishing for termites with a blade of grass is still not the Stone Age. The real Stone Age begins when a hand takes up a stone, and chimpanzees do take it up in a way that makes the comparison with the first humans hard to avoid. West Africa, Guinea, and Ivory Coast. Here, chimpanzees do something that until recently was thought to belong to humans alone. They crack nuts using a stone hammer and a stone anvil. A chimpanzee named Fana sets a hard oil palm nut on a flat anvil stone, takes a heavier stone in her other hand, and with precise blows breaks the shell without crushing the kernel, all for the few rich calories inside. But the most astonishing part is not the blow itself. It is how many years it takes to learn it. A youngster masters nut cracking over 3 to 7 years, longer than a human child takes to learn to read. All that time, it watches its mother, carries her stones, misses, hits its own fingers, and tries again, until one day the shell finally gives way. And if a skill is this hard to gain, yet is still handed down from one generation to the next, then it does not die with a single animal. The digging proved it. In the Thai forest, ancient chimpanzee anvil stones were found and dated at 4,300 years old. These tools are older than most of what we are used to calling ancient civilizations, and all that time the nut-cracking skill was passed from generation to generation, more than 200 generations in a row, long before farming ever reached these lands. So the chimpanzee Stone Age began more than 4,000 years ago. But here, a fair question comes up. Chimpanzees are not the only ones who can strike with a stone. The sea otter lies on its back, sets a stone on its chest, and smashes a shell against it. Macaques on the seashore pick up stones and use them to open oysters and nuts. And the vulture, to get at an ostrich egg, takes a stone in its beak and strikes the shell from above. Banging one hard object against another is not, in itself, a sign of great intelligence. So what is it that sets the chimpanzee apart from other animals? To understand that, we have to look not at the blow itself, but at what happens in the ape's head a moment before it. Let us go back to that same blade of grass the chimpanzee uses to fish for termites. For a long time it seemed any blade would do, that it just grabbed whatever was at hand and poked. In 2025, scientists from Oxford tested this with instruments in hand and found something quite different. It turned out that the chimpanzees in Gombe choose the plants for their tools not at random, but by how flexible they are. Researchers measured how much force it took to bend each stem, and the plants the chimpanzees avoid proved to be almost 3 times stiffer than the ones they prefer. The reason is purely a matter of engineering. A termite mound is full of winding passages, and a stiff rod gets stuck in them, while a flexible one passes freely through the bends and comes out covered in termites. So before it even starts the work, the chimpanzee picks the right material by properties the eye cannot see, ones you can only feel by bending the branch in your hands. And what matters most is that communities, thousands of miles apart, reach for the very same plants. That means this is not the habit of one group, but something shared across the whole species, a knack for choosing the right material. The same knack works with stone, there where chimpanzees crack nuts. Choosing a hammer, the animal looks not at color or shape. It weighs at once how hard and heavy the stone is, how far the anvil is, and whether it will have to carry it along. One stone, the sturdier one, becomes the hammer. Another, a softer one, goes underneath as the anvil. It tells stones apart by how they will behave, exactly as an early human would have. But just how far this goes became clear only when scientists broke a nut cracking down frame by frame. At normal speed, you see just an ape banging a stone. But slow the recording down, and a whole plan emerges. Take the nut, carry it over, set it on the anvil, adjust it, raise the hammer, strike, check, and adjust again. Scientists took 10 years of footage from Bosu and marked every such movement, and across more than 300 nuts, the count came to about 8,200. These are not random blows, but a thought-out chain of steps in which the very first movement already determines the last. Human speech is built the same way. What looks like a simple blow turns out to be a plan worked out in advance, one the chimpanzee holds in its head whole, from the first move to the last. And here, the next question comes up. Where does the youngster get all this? After all, no one is born with such a skill. The answer is simple and surprising. The youngster picks it up from others. Chimpanzees learn from one another, which means each community has what among humans we call tradition. How an idea spreads through a group, scientists first caught sight of in the Budongo forest. Chimpanzees were drinking from a forest puddle when one of them suddenly tore off a handful of moss, rolled it into a sponge, and dipped it in the water. Such a sponge holds far more water than cupped hands, or a few leaves, enough to drink your fill in one go. Another chimpanzee sat nearby and watched closely. Within a few days, not one animal but 7 were using such a sponge, and the trick crept through the group from one to the next. Scientists worked out that once a chimpanzee saw how it was done just one time, its chances of learning the sponge grew 15-fold. This is how culture works, not one genius inventing something, but a skill passing from the one who knows to the one who watches and learns. Another case showed that an outsider can bring in a technology too. Into the Waibira community came a young female named Anyofi, and she could do what no one here could: dig wells. She would scoop away the mud at the very edge of the water, make a little pit, wait for it to fill with clean, filtered water, and drink. The others watched her wide-eyed. And here is the telling part. Even the big, dominant males who usually take whatever they want from the rest behaved differently at Anyofi's well. They waited patiently for her to finish and only then borrowed her pit. Just like with people, what counts is not brute strength, but a skill no one else has. But the most striking thing of all is that adult chimpanzees do not merely tolerate a youngster nearby, they truly teach it. In Gualugo, they craft a clever tool for catching termites, a stick whose end is frayed into a soft brush, and far more termites stick to it than to a plain twig. When a youngster reaches for the tool, the mother does not take it away, but places it right in its hands. Try it yourself. In one community, mothers shared the tool almost every time, in 3 cases out of 4, while in another, where they teach less, they helped rarely, just 1 time in 7. So different groups teach in different ways and with different effort, exactly like different human schools. But this coin has another side. That very ability to invent tools and teach others to use them opened for chimpanzees a path not only to food, but to something far darker, because a tool that gets you food one day becomes a weapon. In the wild, this was first seen in Senegal, in the Fongoli community. Here, chimpanzees make spears. The animal breaks off a branch, strips off the leaves and side twigs, and sharpens the tip with its teeth, turning the stick into a weapon with a pointed end. Then it finds a hollow where a galago hides by day. A small night creature the size of a palm drives the spear inside with force, jabs again, and pulls out the prey. And here is what breaks the familiar picture. Most often, it is not the seasoned males who hunt with a spear, but the females and the youngsters. One of the most persistent hunters is a young female named Tumbo. This overturns the old idea that weapons and hunting were always a male affair. The first to reach for the spear were exactly the ones weaker in a head-on fight. There is a detail in these scenes that makes your skin crawl. After a strike, the chimpanzee often brings the spear up to its nose and sniffs or licks the tip, trying to check whether there is blood on it, whether it finished off the prey or missed. And one day, a chimpanzee figured out that a tool gives not only meat, but power. In the Gombe Reserve, there lived a male named Mike, who stood low in the ranks and had no chance at all of reaching the top in a fair fight. Males have their own way of striking fear. The leader rushes past the others at full speed, beating the ground and the bushes so everyone sees his strength. And then it dawned on Mike. He had noticed some empty kerosene cans by the researchers' camp and began driving them ahead of himself during these charges. The cans clattered and thundered so loudly that the whole group scattered in terror, and within a few months, Mike, who had never won a single real fight, rose to the very top and stayed the leader of his tribe for a full 6 years. The weakest beat, the strongest not with muscle, but with a single idea. And sometimes chimpanzees turn out to be smarter than man himself. In the forests around Bossou, poachers set wire snares for forest game, and chimpanzees keep getting caught in them. But the chimps quickly figured these traps out and learned to disarm them. They recognize a snare, grab it not by the deadly loop, but by the safe edge, and tug until it snaps shut on nothing. The young ones do not get involved, but wait for an adult to do the dangerous work. It did not work right away, but with each time, more surely, the chimpanzees would spring the deadly loop and save themselves, and along with themselves the other forest animals that might have been caught in it. And yet, for all this calculation, there is something in the chimpanzee that the mind alone cannot explain, something we are used to thinking of as ours alone. Sometimes they do something with no use in it at all, and that is what puzzles us most. In Gombes, they watched a male named Freud come out to a forest waterfall. He does not drink and does not look for food. He sways beneath the falling water, steps from foot to foot in a steady rhythm, throws stones into the churning spray, and then sits down on a rock and gazes for a long time down at the running stream. Jane Goodall, who gave her whole life to chimpanzees, carefully suggested that perhaps we are looking at the first seed of the very feeling from which, in humans, awe and faith one day grew. It cannot be proven, and that is exactly why it unsettles us. In just this way, our distant ancestor once stood still before a storm and a waterfall when a soul was only beginning to stir in him. Chimpanzees also treat their own illnesses, and not by guesswork either. In the Budongo forest, scientists gathered the plants that sick and injured animals eat and tested them in the lab. The result was stunning. 88% of the extracts held back the growth of bacteria, and a third eased inflammation. These are not random leaves, but working medicines. On camera, they caught an injured male who deliberately sought out and ate the leaves of a fern, a plant with strong anti-inflammatory power. The forest for a chimpanzee is a pharmacy, and it knows that pharmacy no worse than a seasoned herbalist. And they know something else, something that brings tears to your eyes. In Gombe, there lived a young male named Flint, who never left his mother Flo's side. When old Flo died, Flint stopped eating, drew away from the group, and within a few weeks faded away on the very spot where his mother had died. There is no other word for it but grief. By this point, it seems the answer is clear. Chimpanzees have stone hammers and anvils, schools, weapons, traditions, and even an archaeology of their own. They cradle sticks like dolls, recognize themselves in a mirror, wage war on neighboring chimpanzee groups over land and females, and have even come up with their own wine. They cut into a palm, scoop out the fermented sweet sap with a folded leaf, and get drunk no worse than we do. So into the Stone Age, it seems, they entered long ago. But there is one thing a wild chimpanzee has never done in all the history of observation. It has never made a real stone knife. To find out where this last line runs, scientists tried an unusual experiment. They decided to teach an ape themselves to make a real cutting tool, the kind early humans made. The choice fell on Kanzi, a bonobo, the chimpanzee's closest relative. They set him a real exam. In front of him, a box of treats held shut by a rope and impossible to open by hand. And beside it, a piece of stone and a second heavier stone for striking. To reach the reward, he had to make the very thing the human Stone Age began with, a sharp stone blade. And Kanzi learned. They showed him how early humans struck off sharp flakes by hitting one stone against another at the right angle, and he grasped the idea. He would strike a piece of flint with a stone, knock off a sharp flake, test with his finger whether it was sharp, and then with that very shard cut the rope and get to the food. He even came up with a trick of his own that the teachers had never thought of. Instead of carefully striking off flakes, he began hurling the stone against a hard floor so it would split on its own. You would think the last barrier had been taken, but this is exactly where the answer lies. When specialists compared Kanzi's flakes with the tools of early humans, the difference proved subtle but decisive. Our ancestors struck the stone at a sharp angle, around 80 degrees, and got long, sharp blades, while Kanzi's angle was closer to a right angle, near 90, and his flakes turned out shorter and rougher. He came right up to the threshold of human technology and did not cross it by literally a few degrees. And here is the most important thing of all. Kanzi did this because a human taught him. In the wild, neither chimpanzees nor bonobos make such cutting stone tools on their own, and not at all because they cannot, since Kanzi proved that they are able to. It is simply that in their world there is no need for it. A nut can be cracked with a blunt rock, termites fished out with a blade of grass, a galago reached with a sharp stick, and nature makes no inventions in advance. A stone knife appears only when there is no surviving without it, and chimpanzees get along just fine as they are. What is curious is that one animal did cross this line by accident. Brazilian capuchins banging stone against stone knock off sharp flakes without meaning to, the very kind that archaeologists would once have taken for the tools of early humans. A small monkey accidentally does what the tall, strong chimpanzee does not. So the Stone Age, it turns out, begins not from great intelligence, but from sharp need. And we, who crossed this threshold millions of years ago, are used to thinking of ourselves as the kings of nature. But even here, it is not so simple. A grown chimpanzee is about 1.5 times stronger than a human. Its body is built for a powerful burst. Our ancestors traded that strength for something else, for endurance, for nimble hands, and for a mind that one day came to need a sharp stone. What parted us was not a chasm, but a single fork in the road. For the chimpanzee, what it had was enough to survive, while need drove the human onward to invent. Today, the chimpanzee Stone Age is fading out before it ever reached its first real knife. Man is cutting down the forests, and with every lost family, there vanishes something that can never be brought back. Its own way to get water, to crack a nut, to choose the right branch. Its own school where the little ones are taught all of this. What took shape over 200 generations can break off in a single season of logging. We are used to searching for intelligent life somewhere out in distant space, and all this time it has been sitting by a termite mound with a blade of grass in its hand. In the forest we are cutting down, knocking a stone against a tree, trying to call out to its own. So did chimpanzees enter the Stone Age. They stand right at its threshold, 1 foot already raised, yet they have never taken that last step. What holds them back is not a lack of mind, but simply a lack of need. And now, it seems, we will not even give them the chance.